Hey everybody, this is JDGaming back with, I guess, the first of any of my original deck profiles. Today I'm going to be profiling my Traptrix Psynchro deck, as you can see in the title down below. It's actually a psychic deck that focuses on synchro summons and techs a Traptrix engine. If you're interested in a typical deck profile, follow the annotation on the middle of the screen. It will take you to the end of the video where I go through the deck basically DN style alphabetical order, monsters, spells, traps, extra, and side deck. Otherwise, stay tuned for the rest of the video. I decided what I wanted to do for my own deck profile is, I personally like the deck articles that people write because you get some insight as to how does the strategy itself function on a fundamental level, but then why are certain tech choices selected for a given metagame. So rather than, write my own article on a blog and have people read about it, seeing as this is YouTube, I decided I would do basically a video about it so that you can watch my thought process as to why I came up with this deck and basically build the deck from the ground up. And then it makes any feedback you guys have more valuable because you'll understand what I was thinking when I put the cards in, and then if something's completely wrong and, what I've been thinking for this long time happens to just be because I was playing it one way and never thought of it any other way, well, you'll be able to help me out of that mental rut. But anyway, hope you guys enjoy either way, whether you watch the whole thing or not. And yeah, we'll get started with the profile. So normally the first step to making a deck would be deciding what the theme is, but obviously today we've already come up with a theme. It's going to be psychics that play a synchro strategy. So obviously the first card we're going to play is a full play set of Emergency Teleport. If you don't know what this does, it's a quick play spell that lets you special summon any level 3 or lower psychic monster from your hand or deck, which means you get your tuners or non-tuners onto the board immediately. There are some neat little tricks you can do with it, maybe getting out something like Krebons as an actual emergency defense or something, but for the most part it's going to set up your main plays. The quick play aspect is just a little more versatility on top. In addition to the Emergency Teleport, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Serene Psychic Witch, the main recruiter of the deck. She has 1400 attack, is a level 3 Earth non-tuner monster, and has a recruiting ability where if she's destroyed and sent to your graveyard in any way, you get to banish 1 psychic monster from your deck with 2000 or less attack, and then during the standby phase of the next turn, if she remains in your graveyard, you're able to special summon the banished monster back to your side of the field. So it's kind of a slow version of Emergency Teleport, but it definitely serves its function in terms of consistency, and as any person knows, or any good duelist knows, we need to get as much consistency in our deck as possible for it to actually do anything in any sort of competitive environment. So we'll be playing 3 copies of the Witch. It also works nicely as a teleport target. When you don't draw any monsters, you can just ram your Witch to your opponent, and you can then use it to fetch out the important tuner monsters. Speaking of tuners, we're playing 2 copies of Psychic Commander. This is a 1400 attack level 3 tuner monster, and his ability is you get to pay up to 500 life points in multiples of 100 during your damage step, or during either player's damage step, really. And your opponent's monster that is battling any of your psychic monsters will lose that many attack and defense points until the end of the turn. So all of a sudden, even though this card is a printed 1400 attack, and you can report that as, when your opponent asks, oh, how much attack? Oh, 1400. They attack into it. It's actually 1900 if you have the 500 life. So all of a sudden it can crash with Ryo and kill Bujin Yamato, which is a really nice trick if your opponent has never seen psychics. Rarely ever works more than once, but hey, it's still there. And so it's also nice that you can just normal summon this thing first turn as a solid attacker and defender. In addition, because of the fact that its effect works with any of your psychics, you can power up your other monsters like Serene Psychic Witch. Now becomes a fearless 1900 attack beater, and if she gets killed by a card in response to her attack or summon, well, you're going to get her recruiting effect anyway, so this is a really nice combo here. And both of these monsters fall right under the bottomless trap holes 1500 mark, which means they're great for a particular synchro I have in mind. Also, these things stack, so if you have 2 of them, you can get any of your psychic monsters an essential 1000 boost. Really decreases your opponent's attack, but same idea. Your opponent loses 1000 attack, which is awesome. And then you have 2 copies of Psychic Jumper, a level 2 tuner monster, only 100 attack, but 1500 defense, so it's a little more on the defensive side, but his ability is the real reason to play him. You get to pay 1,000 life points to target any non-psychic jumper, psychic monster you control, and one of your opponent's face-up monsters, and you can swap the two monsters. So what does that mean? Well, it's basically a creature swap where you get to take any monster you want from your opponent as long as you have another psychic. So if you have a Surian Psychic Witch on the board, you can normal summon your psychic jumper, pay 1,000 life points, choose your witch and your opponent's strongest monster, swap them. That means you got your opponent's strongest monster on your side of the field without having to destroy it or anything, so you get around destruction tricks if it's like Stardust or Dracosac. You get around just a bunch of annoying continuous abilities like Ryo. You get to steal that because you didn't synchro summon, and then you can continue making all your plays since he's still a tuner monster. You can run over the witch, get her search effect for a free plus, and yeah, the best part is it's so easy to set up between multiple witches and teleports. For instance, if you have a hand of a teleport with either of these, obviously you're going to be able to just go and say, okay, I summon one, teleport for the other, and then you have them set up immediately. But you can also forego the teleport, and let's say you just drew one of each of these. Well, let's say this witch is still in the main deck. Well, we normal summon the witch or set it and get it killed, which will let us summon out our Surian Psychic Witch next turn. Then, if you have the jumper, you can just play it, and you have everything set up right then and there, just off of a normal summon. Takes a turn, but it's still pretty darn consistent, and when you can steal your opponent's Dracosac with it, it's pretty darn good. Now, let's say instead you have the Psychic Jumpers in the deck and you drew two Surian Psychic Witches. Doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes it does. Same thing, you get rid of the Witch so that you get out your Jumper, and then you still have your Witch that you can swap, kill, get your search, etc. And then you can follow up with a Synchro Summon if you have a non-tuner from your opponent, or you can just decide to go Synchro with them, I guess. But the consistency is the real reason to play that combo. If it weren't consistent like back in the day before Surian Psychic Witch were printed, it wouldn't really be worth looking at Jumper all that much. But when you can set up your other monster, or even the Jumper, with Witch, it's definitely worth it. Now, you might have noticed that all three of the psychic monsters I showed you so far were earth monsters, and there's a particular reason for that. We're going to be playing Nichuria Beast, Barkion, and Landois as our boss monsters, or at least three of them. If you're not familiar with them, Beast is a level 5, Barkion's a level 6, and Landois is a level 7. Their attack stats are 22, 25, and 2350 respectively, and they all have an ability to negate one type of card, monster, trap, or spell, trap, or monster. So Beast lets you mill the top two cards of your deck to the graveyard to negate any spell card at all. It can be used multiple times in a chain as long as he's face up on the field. That stops every spell in the game, except for something like Super Poly that specifically says it cannot be responded to. Pretty awesome. Then you have Nichuria Barkion, who says you can banish two cards in your graveyard to negate the activation of a trap card and destroy it. Though it's a quick effect and can be played, even during damage calculation to stop Horn of the Phantom Beast or your opponent's fire formations, it obviously cannot stop counter traps because of its spell speed 3, so it doesn't thrive so well in formats where you have Black Horn of Heaven or Solemn Warning to really have to contend with. But lately, people are going with Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare, Bottomless Trap Hole, and basically normal trap cards, which means Barkion all of a sudden is safe, at least in Game 1, until the opponent brings in those Black Horns for Game 2, which makes him a really powerful play because you can stop all your opponent's trap holes, but they can't do anything to you. And this is the synchro I was alluding to earlier. If you use your Surian Psychic Witch and your Commander, since both of the monsters fall right under Bottomless, and then Barkion, that you will synchro into, will have the ability to negate Bottomless, the whole combo is able to avoid the limited, very popular trap card, which is a really good asset in and of itself. And with 2500 attack, easily a really deadly boss monster. Then Landois is a little more situational, and not everyone likes it. The reason is, its attack is a little low for a level 7. Again, 2350. It's slightly stronger than like Dolka, who also negates and destroys effect monsters. But he comes with a cost. You need to discard a spell card from your hand to destroy and negate an effect monster's effect. So that means you have to build your deck in a certain way, and that's the type of build we're going to be approaching today. We're going to be playing tons of spell cards and a few trap cards that will bolster these monsters' presence on the board and prevent them from being killed, and that way we can potentially have a lockdown on any card type in the game. So, how are we going to do this? Well, let's add some consistency to the deck, even more consistency with Instant Fusion. This card lets you pay 1,000 life points to bring out any fusion monster from your fusion deck who's level 5 or lower. It counts as a fusion summon, and it's destroyed during the end phase. It can't even attack. Well, why would you do this? Because it just happens that we have a level 3 Earth, a level 4 Earth, and a level 5 Earth non-tuner monsters. Again, the Naturias all need Earth monsters for both tuner and non-tuner, and these cards happen to be various levels of Earth non-tuner monsters. So all of a sudden, if you draw either a commander or jumper and have an instant fusion with it, you can go for a Naturia Beast, a Barkion, a Landois, a Barkion, a Landois, a level 8 Synchro, and your options become far more favorable when you have an instant fusion in exchange for the 3 slots in your extra deck. Is that a lot? Kinda yes. You lose a little bit of versatility, but in exchange you get so much consistency and reach to level 8 synchros as well that I feel like it's a worthwhile sacrifice. If you guys can let me know in the comments down below what you think about whether or not instant fusion's worth it, and whether or not I really should be playing quote-unquote real extra deck monsters. So far it's been working out pretty nicely. But yeah, consistency, that's the theme here, and we're going to add to that. Plus, one more thing, Instant Fusion does have a once per turn limit, so why would you play 3? Well, first of all, by playing 3, you end up with a 39% chance of opening it in a 6-card opening hand, so that's pretty darn good, considering that that plus any tuner monster is going to be a Naturia Synchro in my deck. But the once per turn clause also doesn't hurt you that much because you're not likely going to draw multiple copies of Instant Fusion in your opening hand. The probability of drawing duplicates is only like 5%. Anyway, the thing with this card is that it is only a small percentage that you'll actually draw 2 or more Instant Fusions, and even if you do, one will go for Landois, and the other copy is dumped as a spell card to prevent an opponent's monster effect, which means it has its use. I'm going to have to look up that statistic again. It's a hypergeometric distribution if you're interested. That's how you can find the probabilities of opening with cards. Now, thanks to Instant Fusion, we can play these 2 awesome Synchro monsters. Stardust Dragon everyone's familiar with. You can negate destruction effect and destroy said card. It's great against the Hat deck, or hand artifact Traptrix deck that's so prevalent nowadays, because it negates the destruction effects of any of those 3 archetypes. Stardust Dragon is easy to summon in this deck as early as turn 1 thanks to Instant Fusion, and so as long as you can keep it alive from your opponent's battle tricks or something with your own trap cards, it's definitely worth playing. And it's even good against Dragon Ruler Sworn or Ruler Sworn, Light Sworn builds, because you can destroy all of the Light Sworn decks, as long as you can protect him from being run over, and that's where the traps will come in later. Scrap Dragon is particularly interesting in this deck because of the unique synergy with our main monster, Serene Psychic Witch. Scrap Dragon destroys one of your cards and one of your opponent's cards, but if you have a Witch, you're destroying your card that will then replace itself with something, so you lose nothing, and then you can kill your opponent's card. So in addition to having, say, like an MST face down, playing MST as a chain to your Scrap Dragon and killing multiple cards, as many people will do, the Scrap Dragon can literally just kill your main monster and you still get a search off of it. So that's just another way you can get free cards off of these monsters. And of course you still have all of the spell speed 2 chain tricks to your Scrap Dragon, because this deck is still able to play such cards. 1 copy of Mech-equipped Anganir will be our Xyz monster. If you don't know what it is, it's basically a rank 3 with 1800 attack, whose ability is you detach a material from it to take any one of your monsters that would be destroyed and protect it from destruction the entire turn. So what you do is you detach a material. Let's say we have the Fusionist. This is the main reason we're playing it. If you have an Instant Fusion and a Witch, doesn't seem that favorable, right? Until you realize that the Instant Fusion can bring out Fusionist, and even late game when there aren't opportunities for Witch to fetch a tuner monster, you can still go for Anganir. Then Anganir will let you detach its material, then switch a monster like Naturia Beast to defense position, and all of a sudden you have this indestructible wall because Naturia Beast cannot be destroyed that entire turn. Or, even better, let's go back to that late game situation where you only have one monster. Well, you can bring this guy out, detach the material, switch him to defense position, and now all of a sudden, he can't be destroyed. So unlike Wind-Up Zen Mines, who has to take 3 hits with 21 or more than 2100 attack to die, who then becomes a wall that crumbles on you, this wall will not crumble on you. So Anganir is interesting in that it's a solid defense for himself, but also a good supporter for all of the setups that we're going to create within Yugiohs. Therefore, very useful card, very versatile. Basically fills in the gaps. It works as a standalone and it works as a team player. Next we have 1 copy of Redox, Dragon Ruler of Boulders. You can discard him with an Earth monster for a Monster Reborn effect, bringing back entire Synchro monsters or the pieces for another summon. But this is another trick I like to do. You can now play the new tuner monster, Recover. It's a level 1 Earth tuner monster, and what you do basically is, if you have Recover and normal summon it with Witch, or play it with Teleport, one of those many ways, you can bring out a Redox really easily with its Monster Reborn effect or its Banish 2 cards to bring it out effect, and all of a sudden you have the materials for a level 8 Synchro summon, the 2 that I mentioned earlier, so it's even easier to bring out Stardust Dragon against the big matchups where you want to negate destruction. But let's say you don't want to go Recover. What else can we do? Well, we can play Redox along with Psychic Commander. Now, if you can do this, it's 3 plus 7 will get you 10, right? Well, Leo is a level 10 Synchro monster, and you guys may have seen him before, but if you haven't, his ability is he cannot be targeted except during your main phase 2. In other words, after you attack. With 3,100 attack points, this thing can't be run over even by something like Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning, and it can't even be targeted by effects like BLS, of course, can't be targeted by Dimensional Prison when you're attacking, can't be touched by Compulse until you've already attacked, and you can deny even that chance by not attacking with him. It basically lets you play around a lot of cards that would normally cause problems for your game plan. Usually keeping this thing on the board is game, and considering the fact that Redox allows you to bring him out really easily with a Witch, normal summon of Commander, or a Teleport, makes it really, really powerful. So definitely going to be an addition to the extra deck. So, on to Phase 2. We've talked about the Synchro engine so far, we're going to talk about the Traptrix engine. Obviously, Bottomless Trap Hole is the best card in the Trap Hole lineup at the moment, because it's such a catch-all. There's no real requirement to playing it other than it has to be 1,500 or more attack, but what boss monster nowadays really doesn't have that much attack, save something like Watts at a locals, you know? So, very useful. In many cases, like a solemn warning, you know? Swallow up all your opponent's monsters from Soul Charge, or all the monsters they bring out as a result of, I'm not really sure what else you summon tons off of nowadays, but yeah, you can stop single monsters or multiple monsters, and for that reason, it's basically like a solemn warning. I'd play this thing even if it weren't searchable as a trap hole, but of course it is. Now, Myrmilio is a common sight nowadays in the competitive scene because of her ability to fetch you trap hole trap cards, or normal trap cards, and destroy your opponent's back row upon its special summon. How does that figure into this deck? Well, you can now normal summon your Traptrix Myrmilio to bring Bottomless Trap Hole to your field. Combine with a Teleport to get you a Psychic Commander, and now you can Synchro summon your Naturia Landois, all with a Bottomless behind it, and any spells you already had in hand as a negation effect. The trick to playing Landois is somehow getting as many spells in your deck as possible without sacrificing defense that would save Landois. And previously I'd gone with builds where I'd play a lot of quick play spells like Enemy Controller and Forbidden Lance and all that stuff to protect Landois, and it kind of works, but it really changes the way everything else shapes out. By playing Traptrix Myrmilio, we not only have a monster that can now go into summoning Landois, because the 4 with the 3 will make it, but we have a proactive play going into Landois that gets us the defense right then and there. So even with a slim trap lineup, we can get the defense Landois needs, and everything else we devoted to spell space counts as a spell to make Landois's effect viable. Something that a lot of decks haven't really been trying to use with Landois. And I felt that Traptrix Myrmilio was a really, saving grace for Landois, because I've always liked the card, but it was hard to get the deck balanced right in a way that you could actually defend him and load his effects. Well, voila, Traptrix Myrmilio does that for you. Of course, you can combine Traptrix Myrmilio with other cards as well. Combine it with Recover to get an Etruria Beast in a bottomless trap hole, or other trap cards. You can have Psychic Jumper will go for a Barkion, so you can start attacking and have your own traps, but negate all your opponent's traps. Pretty darn good right there. And then, of course, you can use Redox to bring this guy back from the grave, pop your opponent's cards, because the special summon effect is great when you have Redox's Monster Reborn-like ability. So, all around, Traptrix Myrmilio fits pretty darn nicely. So how else can we use it? I'm not going to be running 3 Myrmilios, obviously, if I just have the bottomless. So that's where Double Nightmare comes in. You've probably heard about it in a lot of articles, videos, etc. It's one of the cards everyone's been talking about nowadays. But if you don't know, it's basically a card that says if your opponent's special summoned monster that was played that turn activates one of its abilities, you negate the effect and destroy that card. So if your opponent summons their number 101 Silent Honor Arc, detaches both of its materials and tries to steal your monster, you can use your Traptrix Trap-Hole Nightmare against the now materialless vulnerable 101 and destroy it after negating its ability. Your opponent drops Chaos Sorcerer and tries to use its effect, it's gone. Your opponent plays Black Rose, that's gone too. Exiton Knight, try to blow up the field, nope. This thing will swallow all of that up, and it even stops some main deck monsters as well. If your opponent plays Yugioh and tries to bring out their Yugioh armor, if they flip it down that turn, boom, it's going to get killed. Obviously, nowadays people have already started adapting, so now they don't flip down their Yugioh armors and such that same turn. But even that extra turn will buy you time, and there's a little more of a mind game that you can play with Traptrix Trap-Hole Nightmare with the trap lineup I have planned. So we're going to go on to the next step. Oh yeah. One more thing, because we have a level 4 main decked monster now, just like before how we have Instant Fusion plus Witch becoming a rank 3 monster, we're going to play a single copy of number 39 Utopia himself as our single rank 4 monster. Now most of you might be thinking, JD, why the heck would you play Utopia of all the rank 4 monsters? Why wouldn't you play like 101 or Exiton Knight or even Maestro, who has the ability to stop both offensive and defensive threats? Well, the reason is, just like Anganir, Utopia has an interesting ability that protects himself, first of all. The attack negation keeps him alive. But secondly, the attack negation ability works as a blanket effect. I previously played with a card called Double X Saber Full Helm Knight, a level 3 tuner monster whose ability was you can negate one monster's attack per turn while it's face up on the field. Or only one time while it's face up on the field, rather. Sorry for that. But that worked as a level 3 tuner in a previous build I had, and I realized that one attack negation is really good when you can save your Naturia and then next turn punish your opponent for overextending. Utopia does a similar thing. You bring it out with a Traptrix Myrmilio with an Instant Fusion, have a Trap Hole card to protect him, and now you can protect all your other guys, and that becomes a little more important, as you'll see, with the tech choices that come. So Utopia is basically a space filler in that he will keep my monsters alive, but at the same time, he keeps my plays going when I draw an Instant Fusion that may seem inopportune. For a bit more consistency, we're playing 3 copies of Pot of Duality, because as you may know, Psychics don't have to Synchro Summon every single turn. You saw I have Witches and I have Myrmilios. Those are some pretty good cards I can normal summon off and get really good effects. And so Duality will help me hit those cards much more often than I normally would. Plus it gets me some of my limited cards, so I really like Duality in this deck. And it's just another spell card if Landois needs it. Then we're playing 2 Breakthrough Skill because it is relevant in the metagames that I'm playing in. Basically, you blank your opponent's artifacts, you blank your opponent's Shien if you're playing against 6 Sams like I do, you blank your opponent's Void Ogre Dragons against Infernities, and you can even hit the Shadow Midrash, El Shadow Midrash that's going to come out next format. So This card is relevant now. It just gained the utility for its second ability, which was the reason that you would play it, other than its immunity to MST, if you were to compare it with Fiendish Chain. But I digress. Basically, this thing has two effects. Its second effect is now useful all of a sudden, so bam, everyone's loving it. And to be honest, I do like it as well, especially when you combine it with this card. The interesting thing with Phoenix Wing Windblast is you discard a card in order to get your opponent's monster or spell or trap off the board onto the top of their deck, thus causing them to miss a draw phase, which is really darn powerful. How do you abuse it? You summon your Myrmilio to fetch your Traptrix Traphole Nightmare. And notice, this thing is usually useful, but maybe there's a matchup where it's not particularly useful. That's when you search out your Nightmare and set your Wing Blast behind it. Your opponent is thinking that they're going to be hit by a Traptrix Traphole Nightmare. So, I highly doubt they're ever going to play an effect like Exciton Knight 101 or something that would immediately bait it out unless they can make that Xyz play as a 1-for-1. So that eliminates the threat of something like Black Rose or, Exciton immediately screwing you over. But they might still be thinking, oh, I'm pretty clever, I'm going to play a monster, wait one turn. Well, if you do that, you're still losing your monster, or back row if you don't play a monster, and the trap hole I search for free becomes the fuel that will allow Phoenix Wing Windblast to activate, thus setting the opponent back a draw phase, unless it just gets rid of their problematic monsters, all of which were prevented from activating their abilities simply because they tried to play around the Nightmare, and Nightmare ended up being useful even in a matchup where it wasn't so useful. So this is how you can actually play some interesting mind games using the Traptrix Traphole Nightmare. Your opponent gains information when you play Myrmilio, so use it against them. Let them think they're playing around you, only to have you fall into a trap. And of course, there's some inherent synergy with Breakthrough Skill as well, because you can just dump Breakthrough Skill and still negate an opponent's artifact monster during your turn, either Midrash coming up in the format, or if you play on DN or something, what have you. So Wing Blast is just a little pet tech choice I have, and it's been working for me. So if you try this thing, let me know how you like it. You might be surprised with discard-oriented cost. So now, time for some tech. So we have 2 copies of Soul Charge. The reason I play this thing is obviously it is extremely powerful, but it sets up tons of plays in a deck like this. If you go for your Naturias, your opponent is going to have a hard time most of the time getting rid of all of them. Sure, Dark Hole or something like that can be an easy answer, but usually those answers are limited, if not literally limited in the Forbidden and Limited list. So what you do is, once your opponent has exhausted their resources, you bring back those Naturia monsters and the materials you used to bring them out to bring out more Naturias, which will screw them over in the end, because now they have to deal with potentially Beast Barkion and a Landois at once, or throw Leo or Anganir in there. It gets really nasty. And that's if you go full Soul Charge. You can still just bring back 1 monster, or maybe even 2 monsters, pay 1,000 or a few thousand life points, not really put yourself in any danger, and still have access to tons of really strong plays. There was a time when I was using Soul Charge. It was with a teleport, an instant fusion, and a normal summon of a tuner, I believe. I was able to bring out all 3 Naturia Synchros in 1 turn, and still have a spell card, a Book of Moon, to back it up. So it was like, good game right there. You can't play monster spells or traps. Really, it's just interesting in that it allows all these combos to go off that normally we couldn't even dream of back in the day when Soul Charge didn't exist. So I think enjoy it while it lasts. It's a thing, it helps this deck, why not play it? But enough on a card everyone knows about. We're going to play 2 copies of Forbidden Lance, basically for both of its effects. One of its abilities is obviously protect a monster you control from spells or traps, or any monster really. And the reason you play this is your Naturias are safe from one type of card, but sometimes they're vulnerable to the others. If you have a Naturia Beast and you're attacking with it, and your opponent plays a trap card that could really screw you over, well, first of all, you probably shouldn't have attacked, but second of all, if you had to attack, maybe you were going for game, the Lance will help you survive the opposite type of card that your Naturia cannot block, which just gives it blanket protection. At the same time, you can continue to block spells if you're Naturia Beast, traps if you're Landois, or not Landois, Barkion. And in the case of Landois, you actually get the most utility out of this thing because you can block spells and traps, which Landois doesn't block at all. Or you can keep this thing in your hand as a spell card, dump it, and kill a effect monster. So this thing actually works as a kind of complement to Beast and Barkion, but as a supplement to your Landoise, where all of a sudden you have protection from any type of card if you're running that Landoise. And of course, the Bottomless Trap Hole and Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare will hopefully keep your Landoise alive despite the attack decrease. So if you're playing a card effect war, that'll help you. Double Wiretap capitalizes on current trends of playing tons of trap cards, especially the Traptrix cards, and Wiretap itself, but it also helps get around Blackhorn of Heaven and Solemn Warning that I told you were so problematic even when you have Barkion. Wiretap as a counter trap, obviously, can only be countered by counter traps, so you use it to bring out your Barkion and make sure it sticks. That way, you can bring out your Trap Negator, who will then negate all your opponent's traps, and by the time it's out, your opponent's counter traps probably won't matter unless you try to summon something else. So play carefully, use the Wiretap to force your Barkion through, and your opponent's going to be in a bit of trouble, which is really great with Wiretap. So that's basically a secondary Lance that's slightly more powerful. Then we play Book of Moon because it's a staple, and its uses are literally way too numerous to mention. Dark Hole, because with Witch in the deck, you can destroy even your own monsters sometimes and get away with it because they'll replace themselves. So pretty useful. You get extra utility out of a staple card. You get Solemn Warning as a trap card. It's basically the stronger version of Bottomless that has the heftier cost and vulnerability to Wiretap, but hey, it's still worth playing because it can stop that Soul Charge play. And then we have Torrential, also can stop Soul Charge plays, can stop basically any type of threat your opponent's going to put at you, in combination with your other traps at least. So definitely the one is necessary here. Again, like Dark Hole, it will trigger Witches, which is great. And then two last pieces of tech. One is a Mind Control. Now, I had been playing Creature Swap in this deck for a very long time, and it works, especially if you're playing against tons of Bujin players. It's amazing. You just steal your opponent's Yamato and give them a Witch, run it over, get your plus, and now your opponent's out of a Bujin Yamato. Why play this? Well, it's because there's so many options that you gain with Mind Control from its specificity. You can use it as a simple, get your opponent's monster out of the way so you can attack directly. You can use it on your opponent's Yugioh armor, steal it as a level 4 Earth monster, flip it up, don't use the effect, and synchro with it, screwing your opponent over. Get rid of your opponent's strong monsters like BLS or Dracosac and use their abilities, tributing or banishing themselves, leaving your opponent down one monster. The possibilities are literally endless with this card, and in a deck that has so many tuners, it's definitely worth running, and I just like this as a tech card. It's been working. And the final tech, one copy of Psyblocker. If you haven't seen this before, this is, yes, another Psychic monster. It is a Wind level 4 with 1200 attack, and his ability is you can call one card name every turn. Cards with that name and their effects cannot be used until the end of your opponent's next turn. And use is a very iffy word, so some of the rulings are a little different, but in general it means your opponent cannot include that card in anything that isn't a cost. So they cannot summon said monster, they cannot set or activate said spell or trap, they cannot change the monster's battle position or tribute it or use it as a synchro material or activate its effects, and even continuous effects or things of that nature will cease to exist. The card simply cannot be used. The monster cannot attack. So if your opponent has Thunder King Ryo, not only will it not negate your Synchro and Xyz summons, but they can't even attack you if you just have a Psyblocker versus it. All very powerful against any card you can name. And at 1200 attack, you can fetch it with a Serene Psychic Witch, so it's almost like a main decked, searchable side deck card that gives you a huge edge in game 1. Your opponent's playing Bujin Yamato, can't use its effect anymore. Your opponent's playing their Evil Swarm Ophion, get right under it, negate the Ophion, can't do anything to you anymore. Your opponent has Dracosac, call Dracosac, they can't use anything of its abilities, can't attack you with it, anything. You can literally call anything with this card, stopping anything, which makes it very, very valuable. Then, time to finally wrap up the extra deck. The last 4 cards we're going to play are 1 Ally of Justice Catastor for its non-target ability to kill Leo and just its general utility against rogue decks. The Armades, Keeper of Boundaries, which is useful against literally the fire and ice hand you see in the picture, as well as just any battle recruiting tricks, any hand traps. I play against Frog Monarchs a lot, so that stops Gores, Battle Faders, etc. Very useful, underrated synchro in my opinion. We have Black Rose Dragon to just bomb the field as a generic level 7, and then Crimson Blader works nicely against Light Swarms, Ruler Swarms, Dragon Rulers, Mermails, Yugiohs, Infernities even, just tons of decks I'm facing in my metagame. So that's what I decided to use to flesh out the extra deck. So the total count is 40 for the main, 15 for this extra, and I guess I'll go over the side deck cards in detail. Now these side deck cards are things that I just play in my metagame. They're slightly unique to the locals I go to and such, but I felt the logic is still worth sharing because it's stuff that could go in the main depending on where you play. So up first is a pair of Fossil Dyna Pachycephalo. As an Earth monster, you can actually pitch it for Redox if you decide to keep Redox in for game 2, but its main abilities are just to shut your opponent out of the game turn 1 if you play it, especially with your trap cards to save you, or you can just set it and it works kind of like a Cyber Jar on your opponent's special summon monsters, killing everything, which is really, really powerful. Next we have a pair of Majesty's Fiend, which prevents any monster effects from being activated, and with 6 cards, the 3 teleports and the 3 instant fusions that produce tribute fodder for free, this card is really easy to bring out on the board, and if it's brought out before there is a threat, yes, that is that conditional aspect of it. If it's brought out before there's any threat, it is amazing because it's basically a Landois that has no cost and will fit right into the deck's theme. Then we have 2 copies of Max C, in case the opponent is able to go off and special summon, have a way around it. This is still nice also for getting Redox to save you, because you can just dump it as an Earth monster, and you can use it as a level 2 Earth monster for your Synchro summons as well. So versatile Max C, use it for its traits and its effects. We have 2 Vanity's Fiend to round out the monster lineup for the side deck. Basically, this thing stops special summons. It's like a 4th Naturia in a sense, if Majesty's Fiend weren't that already. So, similar idea, lock your opponent out, same style of protect the monster, and you'll end up doing well. And then for the spells, we play the 2 creature swap I mentioned. Still a wonderful tech and very useful against Boojins and some other matchups. So, run 2, use it with your Witch. Watch your opponent squirm as they lose their best monster to your Recruiter. And we have 3 MST, just because I don't think MST is worth maining at the moment with the negation I have in my main deck, plus the threat of the Artifact Sanctum causing MST to backfire and such. That's actually part of the reason why I explored things like Phoenix Wing Windblast. But anyway, MST is still very useful against general decks, very useful against certain decks that play like Skill Drain or Kaiser Coliseum against this deck, so very useful card. No reason not to have access to 3 of them, because even if I have it as a dud card, it's still a spell if I miss-side it in, which is nice. Landois is still good. And finally, to round everything up, we have 2 copies of Mind Crush, basically a generic card that's able to kill any threat before it comes into play. Combine it with Psyblocker and have access to blocking any 1 card your opponent has and potentially removing all copies of 1 card, which is very nice. It has a synergy with what we already main deck. If you watched the video in its entirety, thanks! I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did, and I hope you got a feel for the deck building experience I had as I came up with this deck. If you didn't, well, still hope you enjoy the rest of this deck profile in recap. So we play 1 copy of Psyblocker, 2 copies of Psychic Commander, 2 copies of Psychic Jumper, 1 Recover, 1 Redox, Dragon Ruler of Boulders, 3 Serene Psychic Witch, and 3 Traptrix Myrmilio for a 13-card monster lineup. Very slim, but very efficient. 1 Book of Moon, 1 Dark Hole, 3 Emergency Teleport, 2 Forbidden Lance, 3 Instant Fusion, my bad, Mind Control, 3 Pot of Duality, and 2 Soul Charge for, should be 16 spell cards, and the remaining 11 cards are trap cards. So we have Bottomless Trap Hole, 2 Breakthrough Skill, 2 Phoenix Wing Windblast, 1 Solemn Warning, 1 Torrential Tribute, 2 Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare, and 2 Wire Tap, rounding this out to a total 40-card deck. And then for our extra deck, we play 1 Catastor, 1 Armades, 1 Nitria Beast, Barkion, and Landois, 1 Black Rose, 1 Stardust Dragon, a Scrap Dragon, Crimson Blader, Leo, the Keeper of the Sacred Tree, Equipped Angineer, and Utopia as our sole rank 3 and 4 Xyz monsters. Fusionist, Carbonala Warrior, and Practical as the fusion monsters for consistency. And the side deck I'm currently running for my metagame is 2 Fossil Dynapachycephalo, 2 Majesty's Fiend, 2 Max C, 2 Vanity's Fiend. So you can see the special summon and effect hate right here. 2 Creature Swap, 3 MST, and 2 Mind Crush. So that's everything for the deck profile. I've enjoyed testing it out, this format, playing online and playing with friends. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this final product. It feels like a deck that's been finished off for the format. Wonder if I'll be able to play next format. We'll have to see, depending on the shape of the metagame. Maybe some of the Traptrix cards will change, depending on how Shadows affect the metagame and such. But yeah, that's a video for another time. This is JDGaming. Hope you guys enjoyed my very first deck profile, original creation, all that. Yeah. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.